Hey all, we're back. We have another Pauper deck tech here to discuss for this video. We are not really going to end this fun of this format. And we have this one which we call as the Simic Infect or the Blue-Green Infect in one of the recent events submitted from the MTG Top 8 website, in which I found this one I think as a top 4 finisher. So what the Infect does, if you are not yet familiar, is that going with the Infect with poison counters for the players for damage, and -1/-1 counters to creatures instead of regular combat damage. So what you would need here is that you would just only need to have players to get 10 poison counters in order to win the game. And so, since this is also one of the popular formats, not only the deck tech is also used in modern and maybe in legacy. We also not surprised that we are seeing this one in the Pauper All Commons setup. So you can see here we have 12 creatures. Most of them are also found in the modern and legacy deck tech or deck list. So they are basically still common cards per se, and the pump spells in the instance of 23 given 18 lands and 4 sorceries. So going to check on first, of course, the usual suspects. We have 4 copies of Blister Elf. So you would need as soon as possible an early 1-drop for you to get the damage early, and maybe if at some instance you can basically end the game in turn 3 or turn 4 without any resistance perhaps. But with this deck, it's pretty much very powerful for it to win out of the blue. So we have 4 copies for the 1-drop Research Elf and for the 2-drops Blighted Agent. So this agent is basically having this one as unblockable, and it's very important for you to deal damage as the highest or maximum amount of damage as early as possible, given that this is also an unblockable creature and that opponents would really need to have spot removals or any kind of effects to deal with this one, since blocking would not be an option for them. And also, as additional, we have 2 copies of Ichor Claw Mirror. This also goes with the typical attack, since when it gets blocked, it becomes +2 at the 11th turn. So basically, it's just a typical 1/1, but whenever your opponents would try to trade off with their 1/1s or their 2/2s, you would have Ichor Claw Mirror becomes +2/+2 until end of turn. And that will support, we have also 2 copies of Sideboard Cryptomancer. This is just another way to protect your creature by having this one as the backup ability, wherein when it enters the battlefield, you would put up some counter on that creature, and then if that target is another creature, it gains the following ability until end of turn. So given that you can have your infect creatures get hexproof until end of turn and getting protected by the Sideboard Cryptomancer. So that is your lineup. And for your typical setup for your instance, we have a few combinations here of counter spells, which we have 2 copies of the spell countering instant spells. We have 4 copies of Mugigan, which is also the pump spell effect for your infect creatures, in which you can target non-bourgeois creature, gets +1 for each super type, card type, and subtype it has. We have the typical old school Might of Old Krosa, which is used before in the first version of the Infect deck. And if you have cast a spell during your main phase, this gets +4 instead. And another one is the Relic's Roar, which is 4 copies. This is from the new set Lost Caverns of Ixalan, in which you can have target artifact or creature becomes a dinosaur, and by having the base power of 4/3 in addition to its other types. So still it would become a 4/3 infect creature, which can also deal a huge amount of damage. In that, we have also some protection effects for the green. We have 2 copies of Snakeskin Bill. Putting +1 counter on the creature is also very beneficial for it, since it is an infect creature, and also giving them hexproof until end of turn. And also support 4 copies of Spell Pierce. This is basically a counter spell, not only protecting your creatures, but also can typically have a way to 1 mana cheap counter spell to any target non-creature spell of your opponents. Unless of course they pay 2. But early on, this is very crucial and beneficial for your build, since it would only cost you 1 blue mana. And also we have 3 copies of Vines of Westwood. This card would just basically have your creature Shroud or Hexproof. I think this is the old text for the Hexproof. So you can check here, we can see other versions. We only have 2. So this is the original Syndicar. Having your creature can be targeted of spells of abilities your opponents control this turn, and then if it was kicked, just paying 2 green mana, don't have also that creature gets +4/+4 until the end of turn. So that way, that just basically how your instance would work, and getting off your best infect creature deal the maximum damage for the turn. And also we have support with the sorcery. We have 2 copies of Distortion Strike. This makes sure that your creature can't be blocked this turn and also gets to rebound. And also an additional +1/+0. That's also a good value out of this card. And then 2 copies of Blurred Reveal. This is also not basically having you to island cycling early on, but I think this would be its main purpose, is to get a good fix of your lands, since you're only playing 18 lands in the deck, and maybe in the late game scenario you would need to draw 3 cards, then you can just hardcast it for 5. And for your setup of your lands, of course, just a good fix of 4 Ash Variance that can basic land cycling, copies of Forest and Island, so basic lands also, and just 2 copies of Tangled Islet, which can also be fetched through island cycling because of the island subtype. And of course, not yet to be reconsidered is the copy of Rancor. That's 3 copies. You can see here that its original printing is basically a common, since you can see here the legacy. Yes, this one. So it makes sure that you can also have a Rancored elf basically, or a Rancored Blighted Agent would mean trouble for your opponent to deal with, and can easily kill them off with the infect and poison counter, up to the 10 counters, which can be lethal for them. Now for the sideboard, we have a few choices here, which some of which are very specific for certain matchups in the Pauper metagame. We have a copy of Annal for affinity basically, and can also be used for the Auras deck, as in can also counter enchantments. Blue Elemental Blast to deal with the mono-red matchup, basically aggro, black-red, goblins particularly, or any other red spell that can be dealt with. We have 3 copies of Nature's Claim for also for the affinity, since having them to gain 4 life would not really matter in your deck build, because you are infect. You would disregard your life total because you would just still win via in poison counter damage. And turn aside, this is also an additional support to counter target spell that targets a permanent you control. In any other scenario, this is very efficient against spot removals of your opponent. And of course, counter spell as a very good counter for hard counter for the mid-range and control matchups. And additional Archer Clomere for any matchups that would need to have more creatures for you to enchant or to target with your pump spells in any given scenario. So that means that you just need to have a good combination of creatures or pump spells, because in any instance you would need to board out a few of them in substitute of a creature, since you would need basically more creatures in your board to deal constant infect poison counter damage. And last but not the least, average mana value is very cheap with 1.38, mostly 1 mana cost and 2 mana cost in the deck. Color distribution is basically even. We have blue is 22, green is 20, and mana colors is 8 for both green and blue respectively. So we have no tokens and extras here, but definitely much that this deck would be a very good contender for any Pauper metagame, since most of these new decks would really become independent because of the ability that you would need to have poison counters added to your opponent. And in any given setup, you can basically win by turn 3, turn 4, and that's very efficient in terms of win possibility scenario, since you would only need 10 poison counters to deal instead of the usual 20 life total. So I guess that's pretty much it for this deck tech. We have again Simic Infect by Marshall from the recently, not of the recent, but of the uploaded deck results for tournaments in MTG Top 8 website. Again, guys, thank you for watching this one. If any comments or suggestions, just let me know in the comments below. We can have a good discussion out of it. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you guys on the next one.